Hello, and thank you for joining me. In this short video, I'm going to show you what I have seen in the skies during my long lifetime. And one of my very earliest memories of something that stood out to me would have been in the mid-50s when I was a little kid playing around out in the backyard, laying down on the lawn and looking up into the sky. And there in the Bay Area, you would frequently see the Goodyear blimp floating by. The next sighting there in the Bay Area that definitely stands out in my mind was around 1994, around in that time period. So that would be approximately 40 years later from seeing the Goodyear blimp. This would have been a school night, a Monday through Friday time. I had sat down to look through the mail that I had received. It was probably about 5:45 in the evening when I heard a very short "Phew," and it just stopped like that. Now, let me explain. Living in the Bay Area at that time, by then, there were 3 international airports. The San Francisco airport has been there for some time. Across the bay is the Oakland International Airport. I don't know when that was established, but more recently, they had turned the San Jose airport into an international airport, and that was due to all the business that was coming into the Bay Area from Silicon Valley. Needless to say, I was very used to hearing lots of air noise, air traffic. I could tell you, anybody in the area would be able to tell you when a plane was too low, when the engine was too noisy, maybe something was wrong with it. So when I heard this very slight kind of ooh, and it just comes to a stop, I had kind of expected it to pass by because that's what airplane noise sounds like. You hear it coming from one direction, and then when it's right over you, that's one noise. But as it passes to the other side of your hearing range, you can tell when a plane is moving on and what direction, of course. But this, whatever it was, it didn't upset me. I wasn't going to immediately jump out of my chair. But what I kept hearing was a very low, I want to say noise, but I think it was more of a low vibration than it was anything. I kept waiting for it to pass by. It didn't. So after a couple of minutes, I got up and went outside. What I saw very low covering over a few of the houses around there and just a tiny tip of it over my second story was a perfectly shaped black triangle. I'm considering how tall my house must have been. I was the only 2-story around there for a ways. So it was probably only about 25 feet up off the ground. It was very immense. It was heavy. You could tell that. Now I'm standing there in my front yard, almost underneath it. It stayed probably, I wasn't going to move. I wanted to see how it left when it would leave. And I would say this whole encounter was about, I don't know, maybe about 45 minutes in length. When it did leave, in my thinking, this is how my logic works. If it just vanished, like in Star Trek, I would have considered it to be a UFO. But what I saw was when it did leave, something this big moving as slow as I saw it move, I knew it was mechanical and most likely man-made. It moved perpendicular, meaning it was moving up and forward all at the same time, very, very slowly. I watched it for a little while. I couldn't see it as it got too far away because there were lots of trees. San Jose is part of many, many cities there in the Bay Area. There are no open spaces anymore. The trees off in the distance were beginning to cover it. I kept an eye on the late news that night and for the next couple of nights. And I also subscribed to the paper. Not one mention was made about this craft. And I'm positive I wasn't the only one who saw it. By that time there in the 90s, my neighborhood had become almost entirely, if not entirely, Mexican and Spanish speaking. There was no one out on the street when this occurred. No one ever said anything to me about it. There was, I guess, a blackout in the news. I wanted to find a picture of a perfectly shaped black triangle so I could post it instead of this funny little photo here. But they've been scrubbed. Some years back, probably 10 years ago, I did find these perfectly black triangles posted online, and there were some videos of them. And apparently, back in the earlier 90s, there were a lot of sightings of these craft, but they've been scrubbed from the internet. What they are admitting to now are triangle-shaped craft that is owned by the military, which they are not perfectly shaped black triangles. They have somewhat of a triangle shape to them. I will show you some very soon here. I did sight one of them recently. Me move on to my move to Albuquerque, New Mexico, back around 2004. This is Albuquerque here. You can see it kind of all spread out, and in the distance there, it starts creeping up into the foothills there of the Sandia Mountains. This is where the Sandia Peak is. Sandia is watermelon in Spanish, and if you catch this mountain range there, I don't have the whole one in this photo, at a certain time of day, later in the afternoon, you will notice it does have the color of watermelon for a very short time. The Spanish are good. When they came through, they named many different, in California, in New Mexico, and I'm sure other places, but they did a lot of the naming of streets and certain sites that you see, and they're good at naming. The peak, which isn't quite shown in this photo, but almost, is about 10,400 feet high. This is the mountain time zone here in America, and there is a little bit of snow from time to time in the winter. Being a mile high, nearly, the skies are very, very blue in the spring. It's one of the things that attracted me to it. I couldn't believe how blue the skies were, but that's because the mountain time zone is high up. Now, the first thinking about contrails and the airliners came to me through an acquaintance back probably around 2010, but she was telling me, she said, I think there's something to this contrail business on these airliners, because she says when the airliners fly over, my asthma kicks up on me. And you have to keep in mind that in these metro areas, there is a lot of air traffic. So it's something that people get hit with quite often. Maybe around 2015, a little later than that, what do you begin to see in the skies there? But are the contrails crisscrossing. I remember the first time I really tuned in on it, I looked up and I thought to myself, that airliner must be really high, because you could barely see the airliner, but the contrail was very clear and very, very visible. But after a few different sightings for a period of time, I came to the conclusion that what was spraying these contrails had to be small and wasn't as high as I previously thought. I think they were flying fairly low, and that's why the contrails were so very visible. They come out of the back end of these drones, and after a while, they begin to spread. And of course, the crisscrossing of the skies is noticeable to everyone. Well, I moved in late 21, and I moved to Kansas. I live in a rural farming community, and one beautiful sunrise morning early on, I took this photo. You can clearly see the contrails. I see them everywhere. And of course, all the metals and all of that fall down onto the ground, onto the crops, into the water, just like it does every place else. Now, here's something I caught 2 photos of in January of 23. First, I was doing the dishes and I was cooking in my kitchen. My kitchen faces towards the west, and I have some trees lined up away from the house. You'll see the white contrail going upward, but what caught my eye before you could see that, before I ran out to get that shot, was lower down in the picture there, I saw like white. And you know how a rocket launch looks, all that white smoke and everything, noise, the roar is there before a rocket actually launches and lifts. That's what I saw through those trees from my kitchen window. So I thought to myself, go get your camera, get out there. And when I took the shot, I'm looking upward. There's also through those trees, you can't see it because I have my camera pointing up, is very large silos. So it's possible that the white smoke maybe was coming somehow from the silos, but I don't think so. I can't tell you what the distance is. It could be on the edge of the small town I live in, or westward from me is a small town with, well, it has about 7,000, I think, people in it. And there is a small airport just north of the town there. Maybe it was launched from there. I really couldn't say. But once whatever this was got in the air, this is what I got a shot of. It's somewhat dark because the sun was setting, but this was at the end of the contrails. It looks like a plane, but I'd have to say it probably didn't have all that much height, and it's probably not as big as one would think. It's hard to say what they are. If they are an airliner, it sure did launch and go straight fast. Who knew? But I'm seeing some very interesting things here in the sky in Kansas. A year later, in the spring of 2024, I caught this early one morning. The night was just beginning to wear off and the daylight was coming up. I heard it and I saw something small and black way up in the sky. I ran in, got the camera with the zoom on it, caught the picture. I had to move it over to my photo app where I enlarged it one more time. That was all it would allow me to do. And I also lightened it somewhat so you could see the detail of what I saw from my back porch. This is a B2. It is a fighter plane. When I was talking about the triangles earlier, this is one of the craft that is referred to as a triangle. But you can see if you crossed another bar over the back, it would not be a perfectly shaped triangle. That triangle that I saw above my house and all my neighbors' houses was a perfectly shaped black triangle, which they have scrubbed all those photos and stories about that happened 30 years earlier from the internet. But look up, there are many interesting things moving through the skies. I finished with the introduction of this video, which was about me looking up into the sky and the interesting things I've seen during my lifetime. I'm not an expert on geoengineering, but I will show you a couple of photos here and at least get the conversation started. What you're looking at here is a wildfire in the Kansas grassland somewhere. I caught this from my back porch just yesterday. So obviously they're launching these drones from different locations. Something else I've noticed since I have lived here is a very low flying, probably private plane once it gets quite dark. Now, I don't hear it every single night. It's every once in a while, but it's around the same time. I'm going to start keeping track of when it flies and what time it flies, and I'm going to try to get out there and get a look. What is it doing flying so low after it gets dark like that around the area I live in? I am new to Kansas, so I don't really know much about its weather history, but I do know that since I have been here, it has been in drought. And I do listen to the wheat yield when it's harvested. It could be a much better harvest if there was more rain. I recently took a very short video of a lot of white smoke through the night. It turned to darker color smoke as the sun rose and the day became lighter. I became concerned because I know our weather is being geoengineered and they use machines to do it. Let me show you that clip. Notice all the cloud cover up there on the top of the screen. This smoke had been going, I noticed it about 4 in the afternoon, and I was taking this about 7:30, a quarter to 8, 8 o'clock in the morning. The reason I became concerned or was curious about all that cloud cover there in the video is, as you can see in this photo, they are seeding. You can see those tubes there that are spraying out, piggybacking on the wing of an aircraft, probably an airliner, maybe. So that's how they do this. Sometimes they will put the equipment they use out in the middle of wide open range, but most of the time it's within something else that's operating. That way it's not so noticeable. If you had a smoke creating, cloud creating machine operating out in the middle of a field, people would notice it and become very curious and most likely wouldn't like it after some time passed. Now, let me move on to snow. This is Donner Pass in the Sierra Nevadas. It is a main artery that goes east and west through, you enter into California through here, or you exit California to the east through here. Growing up in the Bay Area, it was very common to have the news report that Highway 80 was closed, and it was always this area they were talking about because it got a lot of snow. Also, Donner Lake got its name from the Donner Party. It was a wagon train back when I think they were on their way to California. There was an early big snow. They had gotten off to a late start and they ended up stuck in just a huge level of snow amounts. There was some cannibalism that took place. Some died before they were actually rescued as soon as someone could get into the area. So you see how much snow levels have dropped in the Sierra Nevada. Not normal at all. I've heard online where you hear Californians talking, they're saying that the snow does not feel normal when they do get it, meaning the touch of it and just the way it acts. We have floods, natural disasters, or are they? Moving on, and something that is familiar to the area I am now living are tornadoes. Yet, these destructive tornadoes are occurring in other places. Now, here is one of the ways that something is manufactured to float upward and change the weather. This is another sort of man-made device that is used to put smoke into the air and change the weather. Fires, too, have become suspect to all this that is going on in our skies. I've kept track on some of them. What I've heard is that these suspect fires don't seem to burn the color blue as badly. I think there was a roof or two here and there that was blue, maybe some kids' playground items that were blue, and also cars. I don't know if this is true or not, but they were saying that these fires, certain fires, seem to leave the color blue alone. I know that there has been lots of testing on what's laying around on the ground from all this geoengineering and such. Lots of metal is and other materials too. And so that's why these fires come into question. It's been noted and photos have been taken of the burn lines and burn paths. Across the street, you'll have buildings burnt to the ground. Around the same property, the fire will not have touched the trees. So there are some very odd things going on in our world. About a year ago, maybe a little more, I'm not sure, maybe a little less, there was quite a number of articles about the different countries flying into space and what they were doing. And of course, the US is right in there with China and Russia also. Apparently, they have space stations up there. Others will have them soon. There are lots of crafts flying around in space. Yes, and this too was one of the articles that I was seeing is how much space junk is flying around. And of course, it lands here and there too. One of the most scariest articles I read was the blowing up of the asteroid. Apparently, I think it was the US. I'm trying to remember the details because it doesn't really matter which country is doing it. But blowing up these asteroids, and an asteroid has been blown up now into parts, caused a problem. I think it was for the Chinese, I can't remember, but they took their squabble to the UN and filed papers. Does that give you a warm and cozy feeling? It doesn't me. Those bits and pieces of an asteroid, some will come hurtling our way. But the worst part of it is these countries that have so much up there, the Indians, the East Indians are up there, the Chinese, the Russians, and of course the US. I'm sure there's probably others or will be soon. If they all start testing their weaponry on the spacecraft up there, do you think that wouldn't affect our weather, if not more important things on this earth? I am going to put 2 links below, and one of them will be a video entitled The Dimming. It's by Dane Wigington. He's probably the best known as far as what these contrails he keeps up on a global scale of what this global, our weather changing is doing to the earth. Second link will be to a video I recently came across. All the different clips of these clouds were taken back in 13 and 14, 2013 and 14. So people have been onto this seeding of the clouds for quite some time. What I hope to have shown you here is maybe it's not the positive change they're trying to make us believe it is. I'd like to thank you for listening and watching. Take care. Stay safe.